So thank you everyone for joining us for our second installment of our Made Summer web series. Today we have Lisette Arsuaga, co-president of Dávila Multicultural Insights and co-founder of the Alliance for Inclusive and Multicultural Marketing, and her colleague Zachary Borman, who is Multicultural Marketing Manager at Dávila Multicultural Insights. So as a reminder to you all, we will be recording this session and then uploading it to YouTube and our website on our Made Online Resources page, so you can check it out there. And also we uploaded the session from last week to our site as well. So if you missed it, don't worry, you can check it out and watch it later. So head over to aef.com and right now, I think I'm ready to hand it over to Lisette and Zach to talk about multicultural and inclusive marketing. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. And it's so nice to be with you all today. For those of you who are graduating from college, congratulations. Even though you may not have the fortune of having an actual graduation, just know that I think that it means that that many more people are with you and feeling your pain. So hopefully this summer will be an unbelievable experience for you through this MADE internship program. Through my company, we have hired MADE interns, and it's been an incredible experience, I hope, for the folks who have been with us, but also for us, because you all have so much to offer. And we as companies and business owners truly look forward to having you in our business and learning from you as well as you learn from us. So with that, I'm going to move into first telling you a little bit more about DMI, AIM, and then the work that we're doing, and then we'll share some spots and some information, and then I'll pass it over to Zach. So when you talk about multicultural marketing and total marketing, it's the importance of it is it comes to inclusivity. Today, it's more than a social cause, it's a business opportunity, and it's one that is maximizing businesses around the globe. Companies used to think about multicultural marketing inclusivity as the right thing to do, but now we know that it's a smart thing to do. And those that are moving forward by prioritizing these segments are increasing their bottom line. About DMI, we are a multicultural strategic firm based in Los Angeles, doing work nationwide with Fortune 500, 100 companies mostly. We provide solutions to those who are looking to enter the fields of Hispanic marketing, African American marketing, total market, LGBTQ, people with disabilities, Asian, and any specialized market. We create strategies and programs so that companies can reach these segments successfully. At DMI, one of the things that we did was we launched AIM, the Alliance for Inclusive and Multicultural Marketing, which is actually a branch of the ANA, like AEF is. The mission of AIM is to create a powerful marketing movement that accurately depicts multicultural and inclusive segments in order to promote business growth. Again, the key here being business growth, as we talked about with my business, and with the goal of multicultural and inclusive marketing. The ultimate goal is always to drive growth for companies, because as companies and marketers understand the importance of these segments and the power of these segments, it'll increase the likelihood that they prioritize them in their strategies and efforts. Right now, as part of AIM, we have 100 member companies. They are invited to join us. As you can see, we have advertisers, agencies, media companies, research companies, and trade associations representing Hispanic, African American, Asian, LGBTQ, people with disabilities in the general market. So we were founded 4 years ago, and with an invitation of only 36 members, and we've continued to increase the number of companies that have joined us. And we also created a strong board of directors this year, comprised of some of the top CMOs in the country, for some of the companies that you see here as well, including Sam's Club, P&G, Denny's, Wells Fargo, Diageo, Nestle, and on and on and on. We have 28 member board, out of which 24 senior executives, including CEOs, CMOs, and presidents of companies who join us and advise us as part of our board. Why, as we're here and you're looking to enter the space either for the first time or again, if you did a marketing internship last year, why should multicultural and inclusive marketing be so important? And the answer is simple. America is changing before our eyes. We are becoming more and more diverse. Zach, can you pass the page, please? We are becoming more and more diverse every day. By 2040, whites will no longer be the majority in our country, as many of you might have heard. The younger the population, the more multicultural it is. International foods like Korean barbecue, tacos, sushi have become part of the mainstream diet. Over 350 languages are actually spoken in the United States, whether it's at home alone or on the streets of our country. That's 350 languages spoke everywhere. Consumer brands that started in the United States like Coke, Apple, and McDonald's have become universal. Baseball, which used to be as American as apple pie, has players coming from all over the country. And there are more Puerto Ricans in the United States today than in actually Puerto Rico. Miami is described as the capital of Latin America. All of these reasons that bringing people from all over the world to this country, still pursuing the American dream, but bringing the numbers, the diverse numbers of populations higher and higher every day. When you look at the numbers, you'll see that Hispanic is the largest minority population with 60 million persons, followed by African Americans and Asians. Median age for Hispanic is also the lowest. When you look at these numbers as far as percentage of population, 18% for US for Hispanic, 13 for African American, and 5 for Asian, these numbers are actually all higher when you look at Gen Z populations, and the multicultural groups are exponentially larger than the older you get with boomers in today's population. Diversity is driving population growth. For the growth of the population, the Asian market is growing fastest. Can you hit the next slide? Thank you. Asian population is growing the fastest, followed by Hispanic. Notice that because the Hispanic population is exponentially larger than Asian, it means that the numbers in the Hispanic market grow faster. So the Hispanic market becomes bigger every year than the Asian does because it's already at a higher rate, but again, growing at 2 or 3% versus white non-Hispanic populations that are growing at 0.1% a year. When you talk about buying power, again, the annual growth rate of these populations is also exponentially higher than those of white non-Hispanics, with Asian leading the way. Asian is the fastest growing population as far as buying power in the United States, and that has been so for a long time, and Hispanic market following. Forbes magazine actually wrote an article in I believe it was February 2019, calling the power behind the market or the United States, buying power in the United States is not Donald Trump, it's actually the Hispanic population and multicultural groups that are feeding our power on a daily basis. But there's a disconnect, and that's an interesting thing. So when you look at all of these numbers and all of the growth that is evident by research coming from all over the United States, we learn that we believe, okay, so all of these companies are targeting these market. That makes a lot of sense. They're putting the dollars behind the growth. But as we move forward, actually, marketing efforts have not evolved as much as we would like. Can you go to the next page? Thank you. The marketing efforts have not evolved as much as the world around us has. Next. We have basic human needs that, especially you all from Gen Z or millennial populations, where Wi-Fi and batteries are probably top of the survival list for many of you on a daily basis. Next, all the leading advertisers have expanded the diversity. We have Muslims, we have men who are now featured in beauty ads. We have people with disability. We have plus size models. We have the individuals who consider themselves more than one thing. A person might be featured as a gay, Hispanic person with a disability that, has, may also be Muslim. And all of these things do not exclude one another. It's the and is becoming bigger and bigger. In some ways, this makes life more complex for marketers. In other ways, it makes it more easier because they have different ways to reach these same segments. The truth of the matter, though, that these are the exception and not the rule. The majority of advertisers today are not prioritizing these segments and continue to target what they consider is the opportunity, which is a white non-Hispanic market. A couple years ago, AIM did a survey where we learned that about 50 to 60% of the top advertisers are spending 1% of their total budgets targeting multicultural segments. These are 50-60% of advertisers who are actually spending any money. Many of them are spending, again, no money. Too many companies are not doing multicultural today. So again, when you look at the companies that are spending on multicultural and you look at the percentage that they are spending, when you look at the total of African American, Asian, Hispanic, LGBTQ, and even people with disabilities, and you exceed more than 50% of the population, and yet less than 1% of dollars are spent reaching these segments directly. So because of this, last year AIM started a movement under the hashtag of See All. We thought that there was a need to see all abilities, see all cultures, see all identities. We created a manifesto with a message that everyone deserves to be seen, to be reflected, to be respected. We all deserve to be equal. And we look at a screen, whether it's through a program on TV or an ad, we all deserve to be reflected and targeted at the same level as others do. The launch of See All was actually, we launched it on the first day of Advertising Week on September 23rd, last year, 2019. And one of the things that we did is we took over Times Square. And as you'll see, the majority of all billboards, electronic billboards in Times Square had the See All logo and hashtag with a message, again, it's time to be seen, reflected, valued. It's time to see all. And this stunt that we did at Times Square generated over 200 million impressions through the coverage that we got. We also took a one-page ad in the New York Times, signed by some of the highest level marketers and business leaders in the industry. With the first part of the letter is a manifesto. I'm sorry, We Believe is a manifesto that was created by AIM, with a letter at the top calling all marketers to join these leaders and become more inclusive and ensure that they were not only targeting individuals in some of their ads, but again, reflecting them, embedding cultural insights, using endemic media. And by this, I mean in-language media, or for African Americans, platforms that directly reach them like BET and OWN to reach these segments. We also created research called Cultural Insights Impact Measure with the algorithm known as SIM. The reason why we created SIM was we understood that if marketers are not prioritizing multicultural and inclusive efforts, it might be because they don't understand the power behind this, or they might be targeting them as a quote unquote total market effort, which Zach will get into it with you a little bit further. but they're not, it's when they put a person that may be Hispanic, may be Asian, may be Black, or maybe a little bit of all, which a lot of times people call it the Benetton ad, where they have a picture of each one of the people so that they can check the mark, but they're not really thinking what the messages behind that should be in order to connect with consumers. So because of that, we did a pilot study last year for SIM, in which 79 advertisers took part. In the goal of it was to gauge the extent to which culture in ads and programming may lift brand growth. Next page. We wanted to understand what the connection was between culture and sales. Could we tell marketers that if they embedded culture, if they connected directly with consumers in ways that were smart and relevant, were they going to be able to increase their ROI? So basically what we did is we created a panel comprised of African American, Asian, mostly looking at Asian Mandarin, disabilities, Hispanic, LGBTQ, and people with disabilities. Each one of these people saw 3 ads, so the ad exposure was 33,000. 162 ads by 79 brands. We also evaluated 60 of the top rated shows targeting African American, Hispanic, and the general market in both endemic and non-endemic platforms. And as I said before, endemic platforms are those that are targeting groups directly, where the majority of the viewers come from a particular segment, like BET, like OWN, like Univision, like Telemundo, and non-endemic platforms, which are general market efforts like NBC, CBS, ABC, and so on. And we divided it into 8 creative categories. What we learned was that culture does indeed matter. The ads that we looked at that had no cultural insights and basically were just reaching the general market fall under the 4th quartile, as you see here. And those ads that embedded cultural insights were targeting segments in very incredibly strong ways were 3 times as successful in increasing purchase intent for the brands that created these ads. So I'm just going to share a couple of ads with you now, and I'll share one at a time, and then we'll go through the learnings that we got from these segments and why these ads were so powerful. There's no audio on the ad, Zach. Want to start it over?
Can you hear it as soon as I?
Yeah, now it works.
And I can't change, even if I try, even if I wanted to. My love, she keeps me warm. 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 She keeps me warm.
We are neighbors and best friends.
I love my sister. My heart doesn't see race. Love is love.
Our family is no less than any other family.
Love is kind. Love is patient.
Thanks. So this ad was actually submitted under general market, but as you could tell in the ad, it was a pretty powerful ad with representation from LGBTQ couples and parents, people with disabilities, different religions, different races, so on and so forth. This ad scored really, really high with all segments. The one segment that it scored highest with was LGBTQ. So interestingly about how we measure these ads, so when we measure every single ad against every single segment, because the thought process is, if as a marketer says to me, well, I don't want to place an ad that features an African-American gay couple, for example, in a general market platform like NBC, because I don't want to alienate those who don't agree with it. So one of the things that we did was that we tested it against every single segment so that we would understand the perception from not only those that are targeted or represented, but from those that may be watching the ad. And we wanted to understand if there would be any backfire, any negative perceptions from a particular ad. This ad scored highly with African Americans, with Asians, with again, like I said, Asians, Hispanics, LGBTQ, and with the general market. The general market was the lowest scorer, but still considerably high. We're now going to go to a second ad, also that was scored by SIM, with featuring African American, but placed in a general market, both a general market and endemic media. By that I mean BET and OWN.
Shakeem, get in here. Take your razor, yep. All right, up and down, never side to side. Shakeem, you got it? Come on, get back. Keem, let's second behind your brother. Stay focused. Can't nobody beat you. Ain't nobody beat you. All right, baby. Okay, on. You got it. All right, you got it, Shakeem. All right, let me see.
A very powerful ad from Gillette featuring African-American player with a disability, which never let stand in his way. This ad scored, again, highest with African-Americans because it was a very empowering ad representing this particular group. But it scored really, really high with every other segment as well. And again, the thought behind it is that only because you're not represented in an ad doesn't mean it's not going to impact you. This is it's a beautiful ad, and it was one that everybody took and looked at it in positive light. But there's nothing like the power of being represented and empowered through television and programming. And this was one such example. So I'm going to pass it on to Zach to walk you through the rest of the presentation.
All right. So I'm going to be talking mostly about the different multicultural segments. Starting here, the foundation for total market. So a lot of times what you don't have when you're trying to target multicultural groups is executive buy-in. And that's kind of what we're trying to do with AIM. And you need to have that upper level C-suite support in order to drive a stronger multicultural program. You need to have a targeted commercial program execution, and you have to have a total market mindset. Total market is kind of a term that a lot of marketers, it's kind of disputed because people tend to say like, oh, we're doing total market, but it ends up just being more of a general market approach. And so marketers are continuing to dispute the definition. So diversity and inclusion are two different things, and it's best described with this quote. Diversity is being invited to the party, while inclusion is being asked to dance. So it's, I think that it speaks for itself. So what we have here is what we're seeing is a fully integrated approach. Many companies have an overarching strategy that is executed and amplified using designated multicultural programs. We see this a lot with our clients. I know that with my client Warner Brothers, they had a similar approach where each movie is amplified by a Hispanic program, an African American program, and an Asian program, all falling under the same marketing strategy that they're putting forth for the general market. So I'm going to start with the Hispanic market. So in case you didn't know, Latinx is the gender-neutral term for Latin Americans, as using the term Latinos is not as inclusive. The term has especially been embraced by members of the Latin LGBTQ community, and the term is becoming more widely used in the marketing industry. it is harder to explain this to probably older bosses. I know that for Gen X or for Gen Z and for millennials, this is a term that we know. But when you're talking to your bosses and when you're talking to older marketers, they don't completely understand this term. So what we have here is the Hispanic market is changing. U.S. Hispanics are becoming more diverse. In 2015, Hispanics of Mexican origin made up about 63% of the Hispanic population in the United States. But this has continued to decline over the last few years as more immigrants are now arriving from El Salvador, Guatemala, and Honduras. Hispanics are increasingly U.S. born, as only 34% are immigrants. They're speaking Spanish more than ever before, and advertisers need to start reflecting this in their advertising. Hispanics are getting older, but they're still the youngest segment with an average age of 28. And more Hispanics are going to college and graduating with degrees, becoming a more educated population and community. Hispanics are not a homogenous group. In different parts of the United States, you have different concentrations of nationalities. For example, New York has a large population of Puerto Ricans and Dominicans. California has a large population of Mexicans, Salvadorans, and Guatemalans. And Florida has larger populations of Cubans and South Americans. A lot of companies that we work with, in order to kind of dig deeper and target on a more granular level, you're going to target. So if you're going to run a campaign for Hispanics in New York, it's going to be more of a dedicated campaign to Puerto Ricans and Dominicans because those are the people that you're reaching, and so on and so forth with California and Florida and Texas. So Spanish is the language of the heart. About 72% of Hispanics speak at least some Spanish at home, which is why advertisers need to continue to reach U.S. Hispanics using Spanish. So I'm going to play you guys an ad, and it's a McDonald's ad, and McDonald's has been our client for the past year or so, and I've seen a lot of their ads, and they do a really great job of targeting the different multicultural segments. So this TV spot scored highly using the SIM metric. Not only does it provide cultural references, but the story is authentic.
Caro, eres la mayor, la primera en todo, en manejar, en viajar, en besar un niño, y ahora vas a ser la primera en ir al college. ¿Y yo en qué voy a ser la primera?
En seguir el ejemplo de tu hermana mayor.
Hacer una beca de Ronald McDonald House Charities con el apoyo de McDonald's podría llevarte a la universidad y cambiar tu futuro.
Zach, why don't you translate that for folks who don't speak Spanish?
So basically what you have here is you have an older sister and a younger sister that are traveling by train. And the younger sister talking about how her older sister is kind of the first that gets to do everything. So she gets to drive first. She gets to go to college first, and she's saying that the younger sister wanted to be the first to go to college. And so the younger sister is saying, or the older sister kind of tells her, hey, like follow in the steps of your older sister. So what McDonald's was trying to do, at least because this was for their Hispanic scholarship program, and what they wanted to do was they wanted to make sure that they were also targeting parents of college goers, because they're the ones that are going to be, pushing their children to apply for scholarships and to apply for financial aid and things like that. So not only did this have to appeal to the college goer, but also the college goer's parents. So Hispanics are constantly connected digitally. Hispanics spend the most time on their smartphones and consume more digital videos compared to any other segment. So it's really important that you have a strong digital campaign in order to target Hispanics. And you need to have strong social presence in order to continue that push. Hispanics value social responsibility. So 53% buy natural products because they're concerned about the environment. Another 45 expect their brands to support social causes. For example, right now, DMI is working with clients to help sponsor a live Latin music festival on Cinco de Mayo. It's called Altísimo, and it's to raise money for the immigrants and people working on farms to put food on our tables during this tough time. So we're hoping we're going to get help raise a lot of money for that cause.
Hey, Zach, real quick, there's a question in the chat box. Meredith wants to know where that McDonald's ad was run.
I'm not sure where the ad was run. I know it's new, and that was actually, so I had my coworker run which sim ad is the top scoring sim ad for Hispanics right now, and this was the one that she sent over. I'm assuming it ran in...
It ran in, the ad ran in both Univision and Telemundo, and that was Spanish language media, yeah.
And they usually amplify those with digital ads as well. So if you were being targeted, if, for example, if you're on social media and you're scrolling, there was an ad that was either shorter or it showed the two girls that you probably would have seen on your social media if you're being targeted as a Hispanic and you're of that specific age that they were trying to target. So is there any other questions, or did that answer the question, I'm assuming? So I'm gonna start talking about Black America. So last year, a gay African-American man broke the record for the most time spent atop the Billboard Hot 100 with a country song. This kind of goes to show that Black culture drives pop culture, and it drives all of our culture. And if you were to say that a gay African-American man was breaking records with a country song even 2 or 3 years ago, people probably would have laughed at you. So it's really important to target African-Americans with influencers. They like to see positive portrayals of African-Americans. Celebrity endorsements and recommendations are important influences on the path to purchase for African-Americans. 55% of African-Americans align with the statement, "I feel really good when I see celebrities that share my ethnic background," which surpasses the total US population by 79%. African-American shoppers are also 35% more likely to agree that they will buy a product when it is designed by their favorite celebrity. African-Americans spend more time watching TV than the general population. They also spend 3 hours more on mobile devices on average. So African-Americans agree that advertising provides them with meaningful information across nearly every platform. They're statistically less likely to think ads on cell phones are annoying, which really helps advertisers. But you also need to make sure that the content that they're consuming in an advertisement is more directed towards them. So African Americans seek brands that align with their values. They're more likely to support local markets and shops, as well as brands that are Black owned. For example, Rihanna's Fenty makeup line was one of the first makeup brands to sell an assortment of makeup shades for all skin tones and use diverse models to sell her products. So what we have here is we have another ad. This is a Wells Fargo ad. The TV spot also scored really highly on SIM. The ad highlights African Americans' affinity for hair and beauty products, as they're 9 times more likely to spend, or they spend 9 times more on hair and beauty products than any other segment. Yes, the ad touches on cultural nuances, but is also highly appealing to the general market and has very diverse casting.
This is Nicole. She's discovering her new favorite look and trying out every beauty subscription she can find. This team knows that keeping track of subscriptions isn't always pretty. So they developed Control Tower, which lets Nicole keep track of her Wells Fargo recurring payments in one place, so she can keep the ones she likes and cancel the ones she doesn't. This is Nicole loving this control. This is Wells Fargo.
Are there any questions about the African American market that we can answer, or anything about ads? Okay, I'll move on to the last segment that we have. This is about the Asian segment. So a lot has happened for the Asian American segment over the last few years, especially in Hollywood. We saw a Korean international film win Best Picture at the Oscars this year. Moviegoers went wild for Crazy Rich Asians. We're now starting to see more Asian protagonists in our favorite TV shows. Disney has pushed back the release of Mulan, as it is bound to be a smash at the box office. K-pop has become a musical and cultural phenomenon in the United States.
Hey, Zach. Sorry, another question just came in from Jessica. And going back to that Wells Fargo ad, she wants to know if you could elaborate more on how it's effective.
How it's effective? Well, so what they're doing in the ad is they're touching on the affinity for hair and beauty products using kind of the subscription as a key tie-in. They're also featuring an actress with natural hair, and that has kind of been something that's been a touchy point being made in the last few years in ads, is that we want to make sure that African Americans are displaying their natural hair, and that they have the support. And then also the other people in the ad don't seem to be white, and so that kind of also adds to the diverse casting. Lisette, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important that you're looking at, I mean, it's about empowerment. It's about her physical empowerment, but at the end of the day, it's about a bank, right? So it's a bank who wants her business, like, you know, and is prioritizing her as a consumer and as a customer. So, sending the message that, as no matter what your passions are, we're here to provide you with the financial possibilities to make your life, happen. So, it's a message again of empowerment and prioritization of a particular segment.
Okay. Is there any other questions, or I'm sure that answered the question. Okay, so going back to the Asian segment, so there's a variety of cultures, each being very unique. The biggest concern for corporate America in marketing to Asian Americans is the complexity in marketing to different cultures and languages. Just like the Hispanic community, there are ways to reach different Asian segments based on geographic locations in the United States. For example, LA has the largest Asian market in the United States, but LA also has a very big Korean population, which is why many companies see the appeal in sponsoring events like KCON in Los Angeles. That also goes to show for Chinese in San Francisco and in New York. Those two cities have the largest Chinese populations, and a lot of times companies want to sponsor the Chinese New Year or Lunar New Year festivals in those markets to have a presence there.
So I just wanted to add to that what's interesting about this is that, again, because you have so many different languages and nationalities when it comes to Asian, which they've all been grouped together when it comes to media or other things, a lot of marketers are challenged with how to reach them. But because of the fact that many of these groups live in close proximity in certain places, like Zach mentioned, California and New York, representing the majority of the Asian, largest Asian segments living there, it gives marketers the ability to geo-target them when it comes to their efforts, so that they don't necessarily have to do a national campaign, or or a campaign that is is in areas where it's not reaching them. For the most part, campaigns to reach particular Asian segments are local in nature, and this minimizes the investment that they have to do and maximizes the opportunity that they could potentially reach more than one Asian segment by doing this.
We have a comment that came in from Sam. He said K-Town is huge in LA. So underscores what you're talking about.
Yep.
Let's see. So what we have here is there's a significant generational change that's occurring within the Asian American community, as 80% of Asian Americans ages 35 and older were born in another country, while only 34% of Asian Americans under 35 are 35% are U.S. born. While 66% of those under 35 were born in the U.S. This shows a steep difference in acculturation levels depending on the generation. So this kind of goes to show that if you're going to be targeting Asians in a specific language or in a specific area, in your ads, you might want to show, you might kind of want to show an older population if you're targeting in language, and the younger generations are more likely to kind of consume their media in English, but they also still want to be represented like on screen. This is another McDonald's ad, and this spot features the Asian dance group Kinjaz, which they're huge across social media. And they kind of make appearances across Asian media as well as general market media. So you're touching both those groups. But it's a great ad. But it also features kind of, I know that when we were working with McDonald's, the biggest thing for the Asian demographic was freshness. So in these ads, you have to show like the egg being cracked. You have to show that the food is fresh in order to appeal to this group. Oh.
We, the breakfast eaters of America, have been caught sleeping on breakfast. This isn't who we are. We don't settle for mediocre breakfast. We're fresh cracked egg people. We deserve hot, sizzling Canadian bacon and English muffins toasted to golden brown. It's time to wake up breakfast with McDonald's.
Not only did they do a TV ad, they ran social media ads using them as well, and they also invited them to, I think that they invited them to KCON, and they used them just to kind of amplify across their Asian program. Are there any questions about this ad?
Yeah, there was a question that came in from Layla. What are the advantages and disadvantages of marketing to specifically one ethnicity rather than regularly showing diversity as the norm?
I think
so that's actually a great question. That's one of the things that we looked at through the SIM score. We wanted to know what worked better. Is it targeting various or representing various groups when you're doing a general market ad that's going to reach everybody, or are you better off targeting one particular segment, at least highlighting one particular segment, even if you feature others, to make sure that you have one segment that is the highest one that's going to connect with that particular ad, while also being able to have a message that is universal in nature and has universal appeal. And what we learned is that those ads that had a specific message towards one group, yet had universal appeal, were the ones that scored the highest, even more so than ads that had representation from a lot of different segments, where everybody could feel, represented in one way or another, or maybe even through some cultural insights. Those did really well, but the ones that did better were the ones that had a purpose.
Any other questions? Okay. Asian Americans make, are we getting another question? I have something.
No, she said thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Asian Americans make the most money on average of any other segment, including Caucasian.
Oh, we just got a comment if you could speak louder.
Oh yeah, you got it. So Asian Americans are super connected. They're more connected to the internet and are the leaders in e-commerce, buying online at a rate of 34% higher than the total population. They're also more connected via internet to reach their family members in other countries, but they also have different sets of social media that they might use depending on their acculturation level. So for example, you might be targeting them on Facebook, on Instagram, on Twitter, but you also are going to want to target them using WeChat and Weibo, which are still majorly used here in the United States, but also in China and also in other countries. So bringing it all together, in language communication, let's see. Okay, yeah. So in language communication and cultural nuances are necessary. Targeting multicultural groups without taking language and culture into consideration would be a missed opportunity. Using language and culture in advertising establishes trust and a connection between the brand and the consumer. Multicultural segments are more likely to live in multi-generational households, which means these groups are buying and consuming more per household. So the implications that we see here, the younger the generation, the more diverse it's going to be. So they were saying that millennials were the most diverse. Now Gen Z is the most diverse, and so on and so forth. For brands to grow or even survive, they must become more inclusive, more sensitive, and more culturally aware. Targeted efforts will not make the cut. Targeting the majority, the general market, will no longer mean targeting a white non-Hispanic population.
We had another question just come in from Kendall. She said, is there a similar insight study regarding individuals with disabilities, IDDs?
Yeah, I think that we're starting to test disabilities, but Lisette is the expert on SIM.
So the panel that we had of 11,000 persons was scientifically sound in numbers as far as Hispanics, African Americans, people with disabilities, LGBTQ, and Asian. So we did have individuals with disabilities that provided their feedback as far as the ads were concerned. And there were ads that we tested. One is, for example, as we looked at the one Wells Fargo, we also tested another Wells Fargo ad of two lesbian moms who are adopting a young girl who is hearing impaired, and they're learning how to do sign language. You all might have seen it then. This was an ad again that scored very highly with the LGBTQ community, but also showing the disability and scored highly with this group as well. Interestingly enough, it was one of those where people thought it was a beautiful ad and scored well. As with any ad that features LGBT Q couples, you always have some backlash, and Wells Fargo did have to deal with some of the backlash on that. But we did include people with disabilities. Moving forward, as we're looking at SIM, we're augmenting the number of ads and programs that we're going to be testing. As I said before, we did 60 programs. This year we're going to target We're going to be doing a study in May during the sweeps of 125 programs. And then in the fall sweeps, we're going to do the same thing with another 125. And again, marketers can test any spot at any time they want. So we expect a significant increase in ad testing for all segments, including people with disabilities.
Cool. And kind of to finish it off.
Sorry, we have one more question come in. Sorry to keep interrupting. It's a good group. Brittany has a question. Is it just physical disabilities you test for?
No, not only physical disabilities. Disability is obviously such a wide range. We have tested ads of persons with Down syndrome. We have tested ads who are people hearing impaired, sight impaired, in wheelchairs. So individuals who may be older and have MS or something like that, which developed a disability later in life. So it's a pretty wide spectrum of people with disabilities that are represented on screen. As far as the panel is concerned, the panel is self-identified. So and it's an online panel. So those who are asked to participate in the study self-identify in as many ways as they want. So if they are a person with a disability, they say so, and we count them as such.
I saw a couple other ones. I'm not sure if they were questions or.
Yep, they're questions. Do you want to do this last slide and then take questions at the end, or?
Yeah, that's fine. This is the last slide. So.
Okay. Perfect.
So this is Mark Pritchard, the Chief Brand Officer at P&G, and he's highly involved in AIM and works really closely with Lisette. So if you're not doing multicultural and inclusive marketing today, you're not doing marketing. So that's kind of the top line of this entire presentation. If you're not targeting segments and you're not being inclusive, then you're probably not going to grow very much in the next few years. And that concludes the presentation. So happy to take questions now.
Awesome, thanks. I can read them out to you as they come in. Oh, a bunch came in. Wow, okay. Casey, she was asking about the study, Zach, that you mentioned with 55% of the African-American population. It was 55% in relation to seeing products marketed by African-American celebrity influencers, she believes. I think she was just trying to find out what study that was.
It was from a shopping habits study done by Nielsen.
Okay.
And I think it's 2018.
Is that widely available for them to access?
Yeah, usually if you search, for example, if you search African-American Nielsen shopping habits, usually you'll have a full list of Google search options, and they're mostly from Nielsen. And then if they're not from Nielsen, just make sure that it's from a reliable source that's reporting it from Nielsen.
You can also go to the Nielsen website, and they have a lot of the resources that are super interesting and great research that they do.
Yeah, a lot of their reports are all downloadable, available, and for basically all segments.
Good tips. Thanks for that. Next question is from Amy. She wants to know, what are some of the strategies that are adopted in marketing to target individuals, populations with identities that aren't easily and visually recognizable? For example, class, education, etc.
You know what, I think that, marketing, as we mentioned before, has become very complex. And, it used to be, 30, 40 years ago that you had literally a whole bunch of white people on a screen, and that's what marketing was. And it's developed tremendously, especially in the last 10 years. And we see diversity included, and it's one of it addresses like the one page where we had the Muslim a skater, or the plus size model. I think that we're looking at inclusivity in many ways, not only through that ways that have to do with race, but now again we include LGBTQ, and we include people with disabilities in the multicultural and inclusiveness. There are many ways of targeting it. For a little while, marketers were going away from targeting segments directly through race, and we're thinking, well, you know what, how about we target passion points instead? And we can do an ad about skateboarding, or we can do an ad about singers, or we can do an ad about this or that, believing that these passion points were going to allow marketers to connect with these consumers in greater ways than they had before. And that was tested for a little while. And even though marketers were able to do that, they realized that these were sort of like icing on the cake. At the end of the day, the greatest passions and the greatest identities have to do with our race, with our gender, and with, with our sexual identity, our abilities, and so on. And everything else is, again, icing on the cake. So marketers have gone away from only doing that and gone back to placing their dollars in those core identities or targets that allow them to connect at a higher level.
Okay. Great. Next question is from Tony. She says, when you speak about African Americans, what exactly do you mean? Are immigrants who are non-Hispanic counted in African Americans?
So with African American, again, we a lot of times say African American and Black because immigrants coming into the country who are Black, whether it's from the Caribbean, Africa, or any other place, are not, they don't consider themselves African American, and they're not African American. They can be very different. Their cultures are different. Their language may be different. They may come from Haiti and speak English as a second language. So there are a lot of learnings that are coming from African American and or Black, and those many times are portrayed differently. Even again, within the African American / Black population, there are pockets in the United States, mostly in the South, where Blacks coming in, immigrating, are actually have master's, doctorate degrees. Their income is exponentially higher than the median income for African Americans. So there are some differences, and there are some similarities. And sometimes you can target African Americans and Black together, and sometimes you have to be very clear of the distinctions because you want to be respectful of where they come from and who they are.
I would say also, if you're doing like research, a lot of the times from when you're looking at like a reliable source like Nielsen, it'll tell you, it'll say specifically African Americans, or it'll say Blacks, and it'll include either immigrants or whatever. So it's usually super specific if you're doing research.
Okay, good to know. Next question is from Emily. How do you predict the rise of mental health awareness will impact advertising in the context of diversity?
Oh, that's a great question. You know what? It is something I think that the conversations with mental health, I think, are definitely rising. The awareness of having to do that, and unfortunately, there's still a stigma attached to it in many ways, and it is something that I think that the leaders in the space as far as advertising are healthcare organizations who are talking about their support of benefits, including mental health, which is something that sometimes it used to be that even health companies were not covering mental health. You had to get that coverage through another provider. So those are, I think, conversations that are starting, and potentially some that will move forward. I think I think that today's society and the way we look at diversity and inclusion, as we talked about, is very different from what it was 5-10 years ago, or even 50 years ago. And if we were to have this presentation 10 years from now, we would be having a conversation about a lot of different segments. 100 years ago, when the immigrants and the diversity were people from Ireland or Italy, and they were the ones that were facing discrimination in this country, that was a conversation that we would have had focusing on those groups. Today, we're not even talking about those groups because they've joined the general market and become part of a bigger whole. And I do believe that as we move forward, these groups will continue to evolve, and it's up to marketers to have a vision, to not wait to for all of these things to happen and be front and center, they should have a vision about being inclusive of everyone. And those are the ones that do have the best vision are the ones who are going to be able to establish the best connections and increase loyalty with a greater number of groups.
Okay, great. We have another question from Meredith. She asks, while the McDonald's ad included a relatable story for the Latinx market, it still used conventionally attractive and lighter-skinned actors. As colorism is definitely an issue in Latinx culture, how do you decide if multicultural marketing goes far enough? When should campaign celebrated as a true effort versus a more surface level measure? And she got an up for that, so someone else seconded that as well.
You know what? Also a great question, and I think that we've come a long way in that sense as well. I mean, again, 5-10 years ago, we were looking at advertisement where they were, bringing talent that, that person could be Asian, or that person could be Black, or that person could be white, or that person could be Hispanic, and now companies are realizing that they have to be much more authentic. I think the conversation also with Hispanic, I mean, you have white, blue-eyed Hispanics, and you have Afro-Latinas. I mean, you have a little bit of everything. And some companies, I think that especially you find that variety more in Spanish language media. Unfortunately, I think that is less prevalent when you look at English language advertising targeting Hispanics, because there's not enough of it. And when they do, they want to put it all together. So the casting of characters is more stereotypical for Hispanics a lot of times. But I do think a lot of companies are moving forward. One of our clients at DMI is Ulta Beauty. And in our journey with Ulta Beauty, when we started with them 5 years ago, they even said the fact that they had been criticized because they were called the company for the Barbie look, a beautiful white woman. In all of their ads, that's exactly what they featured. And if you go into an Ulta Beauty store, you look at their advertisement now, they have plus size models, they have trans, they have Hispanics that look, truly are Hispanic, and you have Afro-Latinas, and you have lighter skin Latinas, and a lot of these companies are learning, and they're learning the hard way, because people like you are being very discerning. And I think that the younger the consumers, the higher the bar that is set. And I think that millennials and Gen Zs want to see authenticism, and that's a conversation. For example, when Zach was talking about hair with African Americans, and and having African Americans not needing to have hair that's been straightened in order to appeal to a general market. So it's an evolving race, but as we talked about the fact that, our society is moving exponentially faster than our marketing efforts, and our marketing efforts truly do need to catch up, and not only catch up, but, catch up and then be visionaries of what the future lies, and then be inclusive of what that future should be.
Which is why we need interns like you guys to be rising up in the ranks.
Exactly.
We need that thinking.
Awesome. And so it looks like the last question here is from Ashley. Is there any consideration to people of mixed race in marketing? How will this impact target marketing?
It's a conversation that's happening a lot, and I do think that that is shown more and more today. I think that the fluidity of Gen Zs and millennials specifically is more prevalent than with previous generations, and I think marketers understand that when they portray these younger segments, they don't want to necessarily pigeonhole them into one area alone. Going back to the Hispanic conversation, a lot of conversations reflecting, people who feel, who may grow up here but come from Hispanic heritage, first, second generation, even immigrants, who may consider themselves 100% American and 100% Latina or Latino. I mean, how do you show that in a way that's authentic, and in a way that you highlight and empower these groups? And one of the ways that that's happening is that you are using the same individuals for a Spanish language ad and an English language ad. AARP, for example, had an ad on caring for the elderly. And it was an ad where the individuals that were featured did the ad in both Spanish and English. What was interesting about it is that the cultural nuances for Hispanic in Spanish were a little bit different than those in English, because they understood that even though they're both Hispanics, you might be speaking to different people, one younger, one older, who are looking at being old from a different perspective. But again, using the same individuals and understanding that you can be more than just one thing.
We actually got another question in while you were answering that one. And Sam wants to know how they all can get more involved with you all at DMI or AIM. And are there programs, internships, presentations, etc.? Someone else upvoted it, so there seems to be a lot of interest there.
Well, thank you for that, first of all. You definitely, you can definitely check out our website for DMI, dmi-consulting.com, and learn more about the work that we do. We have a couple of interns who are going to be working with us this summer, so we're excited about that. We do throughout the year, if we're based in LA again, but with everybody working virtually, some of the work that we're doing is virtual as well right now. If any of you have a passion for it, feel free to reach out to us and let us know what you'd like to do. And if there's ever an opportunity, we'd definitely be open to, chatting with you. And if you want to know more about the Multicultural and Inclusive segment as well, we're here to help you out. As far as AIM is concerned, as I mentioned before, it is a branch of the ANA. I'm a co-founder alongside my partners, Gilbert Dávila and Carlos Santiago. We've been working with the ANA now for 4 years, augmenting the efforts to prioritize and target multicultural and inclusive efforts. If you have a passion for this, we are looking to continue to build our movement. And there's no better person to bring on board to help build a movement, especially when it comes to an online and digital efforts, than young folks like you. So to be able to go back to your schools and talk about #CL, to be able to go to the companies that you're working at this summer and saying, I did this, and we should definitely look into becoming part of AIM, and looking to ensure that all of our efforts are more inclusive than they have been in the past. No matter how old you are or what level you come into the company, you should always consider yourself an ambassador of change. And that's what we want to do through AIM. And if we can count on folks like you, no matter where you go in your careers and move forward in your jobs, the fact that you commit to being inclusive and to diversity is already a huge start.
Awesome. Great. Well, I think that's it. Thank you everyone for signing on today and listening to this terrific presentation by Zach and Lisette. Thank you all for your questions. And we will see you back here again next week at 1 p.m. with Mark Truss, and he'll be talking about market research and how consumers make decisions. So don't forget to register for that session. And we'll have the recording of this session up by early next week. So look out for that as well. Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Lisette.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Sarah.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you all, and good luck this summer.